Hi, I'm Mara Webster with In Creative Company, and I'm so thrilled today to be talking about season 3 of Emily in Paris with the wonderful Philippine Leroy-Beaulieu. And I wanted to start by talking about the vulnerability that you've always built into Sylvie as a character, because it could have been written and it could have been played a little bit more one note as a character if it was just about her creating this sense of competitiveness with Emily when she first came into Savoir in season 1. And you've always built this undercurrent of what does it mean for Emily to come into this space and to see someone that reminds her of aspects of her who she also admires, who she's also got a little bit of a fear of at the beginning because she doesn't know what her coming into Savoir means for her. And so I was interested in how you really worked at the beginning of getting this role to make sure that there were always these undercurrents and always these reasons behind every single thing that she did and all of her actions early on.
You said everything. What can I say? No, I think what happened is that when I read for the part, and that's something that Darren told me last year, he said what I liked about you was your vulnerability. So yeah, he did see that it was my own vulnerability, and I did think that when we did the second, because there was a callback after the first reading, and he was there, he was in Paris, and I was super nervous, obviously, but I did think that we couldn't have a one-sided character. Also, because I know these women, I've seen them when, my mother used to work in fashion. My mother was a bit of a Sylvie. And a lot of these women had a huge wound. And I knew that it wouldn't be fair to just say that they're just, horrible people. It's not true. These people all have different aspects. They obviously are people that are wounded. So, and I've always been interested in that. So, in people that, hide where that build an armor so that they kind of make you think how, everybody that comes in a room and is super arrogant is obviously very weak, for me. I mean, it's, as a kid, I could see it, so I think that was the starting point for me. And I was lucky enough to have Darren understanding this and wanting me to, and pushing me there, when we were doing scenes that weren't written like that. They were written like simple, it's okay. She answers, she has these terrible punchlines, and where she kind of slaps Emily on one side, then on the other side, on the other side. But and I like that. I really enjoyed the fact that we could go there as, having a really nasty moments of Sylvie, but also have glimpses of this wound, of this of all her, she's super scared to lose her job, obviously, but not only that, it's that this kid comes, because she's a kid to Sylvie. She comes with this totally different vision that obviously pertains to the new world, and Sylvie is more into this old way of doing things, and Sylvie is like super attached to mystery, to teasing people, it's a different art of seduction, and it's not at all what the young generation does. I mean, in season 3 there is a line that Sylvie says, and I'm not spoiling anything by saying the line. It's like, she says, that's the thing about your generation, there's not a shred of mystery, everybody knows where you are all the time. And it is a really important element for Sylvie. And so she's also confronted to this. She's confronted to somebody who comes with this. Well, it's very clear in season 1. There's a lot of lines Sylvie says to Emily about that. Confronted with this, like, what Sylvie thinks as not being classy, not being elegant, not being sophisticated, and it's a different way of seducing, I think, because ultimately publicity is about seducing people. So it's a different way of seducing. And I guess the confrontation is really there. Plus, she is that for Sylvie, as a French person, Emily embodies that perfect American girl that thinks she is perfect. And it's going to be very interesting for everybody to see Emily struggle with her perfection in season 3, because obviously she thinks she's doing the right thing all the time, yet she is absolutely, I can't say it, but she's obviously wrong and she's hurting people. So that's something that is quite profound that Darren is putting in there, and I hope people will see it, because it's really about what is perfection. What is thinking you're always doing the right thing when you're just, is it really the right thing if people are so hurt and just they can't rely on you, that if you're not reliable? See what I mean? So it's also that Sylvie sees, and so she looks at her with a sort of I think there's a beginning, she's scared. After a while she's kind of curious, what is this animal, how does she move, and trying to give her some tips. But Emily is quite stubborn. She has her own ways, so she's not going to listen, obviously. And but there's also a sort of a motherly thing that comes in season 3, especially, which is like, how can you behave like that? She's trying to teach her lessons about life, which is something a parent would do, not really, a boss, but not really by showing her something, by showing her that that's not how you behave. That's not what you do. That's not what so yeah, it's very complex, actually. The relationship is quite complex, and we haven't figured out with Lily where we have figured out where we are, but we haven't figured out how far we can go into liking each other, because we can't really. There's always a moment where we're going to be, I mean, Darren is never going to let us love each other. Otherwise the series is over. But yeah, it's super interesting. I mean, what happens in season 3 is more about the feud with Kate, which really, Kate Walsh, Madeline, that really represents America at that point, because Emily has evolved. She's kind of morphing a little bit into a Parisian person. Not really, but she's trying. And and Madeline is still like, so corporate in her way of doing things, that that's where the big antagonism is, in especially the beginning of the season. It was a long answer for a very simple question, but
no, it's such a wonderful answer, though. And one of the things that I love about watching your performance and the way that Sylvie seeds her power is she's someone who understands that she doesn't need to fill the space in a room. She doesn't need to be the person talking the loudest, talking the most, moving around the most. So there's a lot of stillness and quietness in a lot of moments in your performance that are very communicative. And was that something that you found early on about the way that she was going to hold and control power in these very still and very minute moments where it's almost making other people come into her space rather than going into theirs?
Yeah, I think it's a real difference between our cultures. It's what the French call bragging about the Americans. I mean, how they always want to prove themselves, whereas French people don't really need that. They're just, and I consciously made the choice of just being like a sort of a mountain. I'm like, I'm here. And if you don't notice me, doesn't matter. But you will notice me. I know. It's like that kind of and also because I think sometimes silence, as you said, it's like more when you have somebody like Emily in front of you who's moving around a lot, talking a lot, that's all you want to do. It's just like a cat. It's a cat thing. The cat looks at its prey and it just, and then at a certain point it just, and I love that. I did think of Sylvie as a big cat. I was thinking of her as a panther at the beginning. It's like, and that kind of stillness, and looking around, always looking. She's a very curious person. That's how she finds her inspiration and her power too. So she's somebody who, and so it was really important for me to be still. And I'm very glad you noticed.
And it's also really great as the show progresses and there's more layers and textures to add to her as a character, in getting to see her go through this journey of what does it actually mean for someone like Sylvie to step out on their own and start their own company. Because as someone who's very confident, we get to see her feeling very untethered. Even just the added element of what does it mean to start this company and to have her colleagues in her home and to have the lines blurring in a way that she's not comfortable with. And the idea that this might not succeed feels very prevalent for her. And so how did you approach kind of distilling down elements that you've built of, well, what does it look like when she's very untethered, and the things that she has feared could very potentially come true for her at this point?
Um, I was trying to like, I was trying to channel her courage, because I thought, okay, this is, everything's very insecure, as of all moving parts around her, and obviously we don't want to spoil what happens, but she gets in a really, really, really bad situation at a certain point, and but yet she has that courage, even though there's a scene after a moment of feud with Madeline where she's smoking a cigarette alone outside in the street, and Emily sees her and feels sorry for her. But when I saw the scene, I thought it's funny because I'm sure that Sylvie doesn't feel sorry for her at all. She's just, okay, I'm beat, but I'm like a wounded hero, but I'm gonna get up and fight again. So I was really looking for that. It's a wounded hero that fights for survival. That's what I was really into, especially the first 3 episodes. Yeah.
And in season 2, with the idea that the arc was building towards her leaving Savoir, starting her own agency, bringing the rest of the team with her, I believe that was something that you didn't know from the very beginning of the season that Darren was writing in, because the scripts are obviously still in progress in television, but that you had this sense that she was hiding something. And so I was interested in the aspect of having a sense that she's hiding something, but not necessarily knowing the details, and finding how you're going to play to that when it could go in a myriad of different directions.
Well, that's a funny thing about Darren. I think in the writing process that they have, and with us being in the in working while they're writing, I think our unconscious kind of communicates, because yes, at the beginning of season 2 I was like, okay, she doesn't say much, she's just looking at all these kids having their feud, because that was the main thing at the beginning of season 2 was. And so she's looking at this, with Emily, and her best friend, Camille, and then Camille betraying Camille, and the whole thing. And I was like, okay, I'm just, as a cat, again, I'm watching them and I'm thinking, this is I'm kind of judging the situation, thinking, oh, this is ridiculous. What is happening is ridiculous. But still, I had the feeling that it could not be only about that. I knew that Darren is, I know he's talented, and I knew there was something brewing, and I didn't know what. So I was building a sort of secret inside of Sylvie. That was not, obviously, I didn't know about the French Revolution at all, but when it came, I was like, yes, but I knew she had a secret. I knew something was brewing. I knew. So it was like, I didn't need to know what it was. It was just the feeling that you're keeping something from the audience that was so nice. It's like, okay, guys, I'm here, but there's something else going on in my head. And it could be anything, but that already gives you a different presence and a different way of getting into the scenes and everything. So it was very interesting, because you obviously very insecure as an actor. You think, oh, maybe they're writing me off, maybe nothing is going to happen, or you never know. And then the French Revolution comes, and I'm like, okay, great. That's I think Darren gets me. He knows that I have I have this strength that comes from anger, probably, that a lot of us have, and I'm trying to use it in different ways to put that energy in different places. And so that's why he was writing that. I know now that he was writing that because he feels my energy and he says, okay, this girl is capable of, you know, the other time, I mean, last year when we were filming, this year when we were filming season 3, he said, I know your game. And I was like, my God, what's going to happen? And something did happen at the end of season 3, where I put myself in a really delicate situation. Um, and I loved it too. I thought it was great that he put me in that situation, because now the challenge for Sylvie is huge. It's like, okay, yeah, I don't want to spoil again, but there's so many, it's huge, and it's very personal, it's very intimate, it's about beliefs, it's about, coherence, it's about being true to yourself, about having, so it's super nice because it's deep. And yeah.
And when you got to the point in the show as well where we started to get more of her backstory as a character and, learning a little bit more about her marriage to Laurent and the club in Saint-Tropez, those were such delicious details, but also it said so much about, yes, she's been very dedicated to running this business, but also when that was the life that she wanted, she dove headfirst into that as well. So no matter what she's setting out to achieve, or no matter what life she wants, she will find a way to build it for herself. And I was interested in when Darren kind of gave you some of those details, because that can sometimes pivot ideas that maybe you had originally had for what her backstory would have been when you first got cast.
No, I mean, he really did. I found out about my previous life in the South when we started season 2, because that's where it was, at the beginning of the season. And I thought it was so interesting that he kind of saw me. It's funny because they asked me for pictures to put on the that there's a picture wall in the bar, and they asked me for a picture, and I gave them as me like 20 years ago, so I gave them some pictures, and they chose one where I really looked more like a hippie than like Sylvie. And I thought it was great because that's exactly where I thought, okay, this is a girl that was living bare feet basically, being a photographer a little bit, but always hanging a bathing suit in her bag. And so I can imagine her in Saint-Tropez, a very light life, a very light and simple. And then she has this drive which forces her to leave that place, but not divorcing her husband, because that's the anchor, and she doesn't want to lose that. And then she goes to Paris and she's wearing these high heels, which were super important for me because they really hurt, and I don't like wearing heels. And the more they hurt, the better it is for Sylvie, in my opinion, as an actress. So we're always like, finding shoes that are like, oh my God, do they hurt? Yeah, they hurt, but yeah, I'm gonna have to wear them because it's great. It just reminds me that she was walking bare feet before, and she gave up a lot to become Sylvie. So that gave an additional layer of pain and wound, and where does that drive come from? And I think that we'll know in season 4, because something has been put in the end of season 3. There's a seed that Darren put there that is probably gonna bloom, I hope, grow and bloom. I think so. But yeah, and I didn't know anything. So it was basically, I think that's why I really believe that it's something that has to do with the invisible world, like unconscious world, where people communicate in a totally different level. And yeah, and he's a very sensitive person, so obviously.
I love what you're saying there about the shoes as well, because I've heard you talk about how the costumes that you wear, because there's often very tight silhouettes to them, and even just the shoes kind of give you the sense of how she holds herself in the world because of how it makes you hold yourself in the world. Right. But even just that detail of, if the shoes are tall and the shoes hurt, it shows what she's given up to pursue this. And so how have you really loved the way that you can use costume to tell such a story about Sylvie as a character and her evolution and her arc in the show?
Well, it was funny because season 1 I was really dressed like with super black clothes, very very conceptual kind of fashion, kind of softened up in season 2. And now what is happening that is really nice is that we worked with the costume designer, and we worked with her to do that, because it's interesting that what people are going to see in season 3 is that Emily is becoming more and more Parisian in her clothes too, and Sylvie is starting to wear more collars, as if, this is starting to, they're really, because we haven't had, as I said at the beginning, we haven't had the opportunity as characters to really exchange at a very deep level. Except there's a little scene where it says, I know you think of Madeline as a mentor, and I hope you one day, but still, so the clothes kind of show in a very subliminal way that they're kind of wearing off on each other, and I really like that. And we talked about it with Lily, and it was great because, and also in some scenes, what Marilyn did that was crazy was that Lily would come in with a certain with there's certain different colors, and I had the same kind of colors on, and that wasn't something that she usually plans, Marilyn, but for some reason she went, oh my God. And sometimes she said, oh God, it's incredible. Unconsciously I went, it's so funny, because when you've been working on this kind of project for a long time, things become obvious, and they happen. You don't know how,
No, I really loved that scene that you're talking about in terms of her wanting Emily to at some point see her as some point of mentor. And it feels like she's someone who puts Emily through the ringer, in part because that's what she went through when she came into this world and came into the marketing. I'm sure that there were aspects of her having to play the game a little bit like a guy at times. And so what are some of the aspects and traits that you have found or interwoven into her as a character, thinking about that idea of, yes, this is the world that she's working in now, but what is the world that she came into, and the world of people that she was looking up to and emulating when she started out?
Well, what I think it's like, I didn't think about it this way. I thought about it, it's the amount of suffering and sacrifice you have to go through to get somewhere. And as you said, when Emily comes in, she says, okay, girl, you want to work with me? Let's do this, but it's not going to be easy, because she knows it's a life lesson and it's important, and she has that tough love with Emily, because I do think that sometimes there's that scene in season 3, there's a scene where that's very emotional at the bottom of the Eiffel Tower. It's the first episode, so I'm not really spoiling anything, but where it's really emotional for Sylvie, that to find out that she can't trust Emily, and she's betraying everyone, but and it's like, okay, I can't talk about it, because if I talk about it I'm spoiling, but anyway, so it's about tough love. It's about getting a revenge. When you walk out of there's a line you shouldn't cross, and if you cross it, you're gonna get it. As a cat would do to his cubs. It's like, have you watched a cat? Cats are incredible.
I have one, yeah.
The way they educate their kittens, it's incredible. It's like, whoa, and I love that. I think it's it's a great metaphor of actually love that makes you grow, and not just love that makes you stay a child. If you want to grow, you need a little bit of tough love.
I mean, within that as well, I also really love the way that her compliments are so hard won, but when she does give them, they mean so much to the people around her. But equally, half the time, her version of giving a compliment is giving less of an insult. And so I was interested in how you get to enjoy playing, especially like the comedic beats of what that means and what that looks like for her.
I don't really overthink it. I don't overthink it. I just love it. I just love it, because I think it's funny, because we were talking with Bruno Goiri, who plays Luc, the other day, and they were asking us, who would you want to play if it wasn't your character? And Bruno was saying Sylvie, because I'd like to tell everybody shut up. And I thought, and I know, I love him. We really get along super well, and he's a great actor. And I love that. It's like chocolate. I love that. When I get one of those lines, I'm like, yay, I get to be a bit tough. It's great. And yeah, and I think it's just tough love, and I just don't overthink it. I just say it because I know what it means. I mean, there's nothing to say about that. This is who she is. I don't have to apologize for it because that's who she is. That's what's really great about this character. She's not only is she unapologetic in real life as a character, but also as an actress. I don't need to justify anything. I don't judge her, and I don't need to justify the fact that she's tough, or that she's, because it's fun. It's so much fun, and it's so true.
No, that's what makes it such a, I imagine, like such a great character to play because of all of those layers to it. And with what you were saying before as well about the synergy that's developing between her and Emily, and even just the way that the costumes start to come together. Also, as much as the show is about Emily kind of adapting into Parisian life, it's also about the influence that has about people around her. And so there's little elements of Sylvie that have started to pick up on certain American aspects of what Emily brings into that world. And so for you, what are some of the traits that you've started to really find in Sylvie from the American side and the influence that Emily brings in her direction?
Well, first of all, she's much more open to Emily's ideas. Um, No, she picked up the pace. I mean, I think the moment Emily meets Sylvie, it's the company is a bit sleeping. It's sleeping a little bit. I mean, it's like it's working on, and I mean on old systems and everything. So, and now that, I'm sorry, my English is not as precise I would like it to be, but anyway. And what happens is that what I see that Sylvie's picking up is that she's much more of a fighter than she was at the beginning, where she was more complaining and bitching around, when now she's fighting for it. That's probably something that Emily gave her, because she sees how bold. I mean, she was probably very bold when she was young, Sylvie. But once you get older and your company just does well, you don't need to make any efforts. But then that's why I like the challenge also of having to build your own company, blah, 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 because it brings her back to a fighting mode that she kind of had lost, not only because of her age, but probably because of the culture. So Emily brings that back. It's like, and she has to fight for Emily at the beginning of season 3, which is also something that probably the French wouldn't do. They would say, okay, let her just go. So it's more, I can't, I don't, there's so many things that I really feel when I'm playing the character that I don't want to overstate, because I don't want to otherwise put too much, intellectualize too much, because otherwise I know what it does to me as an actor. So I want to kind of keep it keep a sort of instinct at a certain level. Even though I can talk about Sylvie forever, I still want to keep it as natural as possible, as genuine as possible.
Yeah, no, that completely makes sense. And having worked on this show for 3 seasons with the rest of the cast now, and especially because it's a show where there's so many wonderful ensemble scenes within the workplace, especially, I was just interested in how the dynamic with you and the rest of the cast has really grown and evolved into a shorthand. Because obviously, when you're first cast in a show, you're all coming into it together, you're figuring out your own characters, you're figuring out what that dynamic looks like with everybody else's characters. And then at this point, you have such a sense of who Sylvie is, but you also have such a sense of who the other characters are. And so how has that really changed the dynamic of what goes into working on scenes together, and just that shorthand that everybody has?
Well, it's mostly with Samuel, with Julia and Luc, and we've become like really close, especially on set. So yeah, they're super cute. And sometimes I in the middle of a scene, when rehearsing, and I'm just like, why isn't Sylvie firing you guys? I mean, I don't understand. And we always have these jokes, a lot of jokes about the fact that for some reason these characters look like they're not so good at what they do, and we're finding out that really why she needs them, why she needs to have them by her side, because Luke, in his craziness, is the one who brings ideas that are totally out of the box. Julien is much more, you know, she needs that too, and so we have now we have a relationship that's very simple, basically, because we know exactly where we are, you know, where everybody is, and with Lily, it's been great because this relationship has evolved so much, also in real life. So uh, sometimes we don't say anything we don't really talk about what we do, even with Kate. We don't talk about it. We're in character, but we know that the other one is already in a different space. I mean, in that space, and I'm in that space, and it was very organic with Kate. We never talked about all the scenes we have at the beginning of the season, and it came out so, you know, so beautiful to work with her. And Lily, it's the same. Sometimes we say, okay, do you realize that this, and this? And she says, yeah, I know. And it's like, you know, so we both really think about what is happening, but we don't tell each other. So it's become very easy, I'd say. Very, very easy. Yeah.
It's wonderful to hear. Well, it's always so great watching your performance in the show. So it's been such a pleasure to hear all about this. Really, really appreciate it. Thank you so much, Philippine.
Thank you.